Welcome to the Church of Rock Show, Episode 1, The Velvet Underground, The Velvet Underground Nico. Sponsoring this episode is Nobody. If you have a product or service that you would like to advertise on the show, please contact us by either going to the website, thechurchofrockshow.com, and using the Contact Us section of the page, or you can send us an email at churchofrockshow@gmail.com, and we will see if we have a mutual fit. You can support the show by telling the music fan in your life about the show. Word of mouth goes a long way and would be greatly appreciated. If you like what you hear, consider leaving us a 5-star review for the show on Apple Podcasts. We want to get this content out to as many people as possible, and those reviews go a long way with getting the show to the top of the directories. Also hit the subscribe button to wherever you listen to your podcast to be sure that you never miss an episode. Welcome everybody to the podcast. Can't believe it. This has been 2 years in the making for me, and finally got this thing off the ground, and here we are. And unfortunately, I'm a little bit under the weather, so we're just gonna have to bear with me with a little bit of hoarse voice and not my normal self. And of course, with this new podcast getting off the ground, there's going to be a lot of hiccups going on here. There's going to be some environmental stuff going on outside that is a little bit out of my control. When it comes to editing, I'm just not there yet when it comes to this whole thing here, as it's all brand new to me. But, just like anything else, you got to start somewhere. And, I'm not at my peak right now, but we're going to get through this, and it's going to be an exciting adventure. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm a huge music fan, and to be able to talk about some of these albums that have really had a profound effect on my life is just something that is going to be a really fun passion project for me, if for nothing else. And I hope that all of you are very entertained by this and will continue to come back to me, and we'll talk about more albums as we go along. But now that we're not really at our best and everything's a little bit rough, is there any better album to start out with than the Velvet Underground Nico? I mean, this could be one of the roughest albums that I'm ever gonna critique and talk about, and it's just so raw in every aspect when it comes to the content and the lyrics and the recording of it. So, man, what a better place to start at number one than with the Velvet Underground and Nico. So let's get into this. The Velvet Underground Nico is the debut album of who I consider one of the pioneers of alternative or pre-punk music, the Velvet Underground. The album was released on March 12, 1967, with recording sessions occurring on various dates from the spring of 1966 through November 1966, with the work being done at 3 different studios: Scepter Studios in New York City, Mayfair Studios in New York City, and TTG in Hollywood. To get things started, the Velvet Underground consists of Lou Reed on lead vocals and guitars, John Cale on bass, viola, backing vocals, and other assorted instruments, Sterling Morris on rhythm guitar and backing vocals, Maureen Tucker on drums and percussion, and Nico on lead vocals. The story of the Velvet Underground and Nico is like no other in the mid-60s. The Beatles and Bob Dylan were mainstream warriors of the new movement of music and art that was capturing the imagination of young people who were turning into adults' worst nightmare. Artists like the Beatles and Dylan were painting images of the current events of the world, that, as well as the topics of getting high mostly on marijuana and psychedelics, and discussing the political climate, were becoming more the norm for rock and pop artists. But the Velvet Underground were showing the darkness of an underworld that many never get or want to see, but this music brings you there. The music can also open one's mind to their curiosities or things they would never act upon. We are introduced in the world of the hardest and most addictive drugs imaginable, like heroin, sexual deviancy, unsavory characters, and high art. Speaking of high art, let's talk a little bit about Andy Warhol, the listed producer on the album. Not to make this whole thing too much about Andy Warhol, as most of us know his art, his fame, and his circle he ran in, but Warhol's creative hub called the factory that gave the Velvet Underground a platform to perform their music in front of interesting and unique crowds. Warhol and the Velvets were brought together by filmmaker and factory product Paul Morrissey. Morrissey saw the Velvets perform what is to believe their first gig and was impressed with what he heard and what he saw. He suggested the band should consider coming to the factory fold and use Warhol as their manager in a loose sense. Morrissey brought the idea of him to the Velvets getting together. Here's a quote from Paul Morrissey. Andy didn't want to get into rock and roll. I wanted to get into rock and roll to make money. Andy didn't even want to do it. He would never have thought of it. Even after I thought of it, I had to bludgeon him into doing it. My idea that there can be a lot of money managing a rock and roll group and got its name in the papers. And that was one thing Andy was good for, getting his name in the papers. Lou Reed on Andy Warhol's initial involvement with the band and why it fit. To my mind, nobody in music was doing anything that even approximated the real thing, with the exception of us. We were doing a specific thing that was very, very real. It wasn't slick or a lie in any conceivable way, which was the only way we could work with him, because the very first thing I liked about Andy was that he was very real. History has proven that Lou Reed was a great frontman and solo performer with a lot of unique charisma and cool about him, but Morrissey wasn't convinced and sold that Reed was the person for the job to be the lead vocalist in the face of the Velvet Underground. Morrissey suggested Warhol that German model Nico would be the perfect centerpiece for the Velvet Underground. I bet it didn't take much convincing for Warhol to say yes, having a beautiful and exotic artsy woman around the factory, but the band, especially Lou Reed and John Cale, were not convinced. But this is 1965, and these guys have no clout, especially when it comes in this situation, because their brand of music is not very accessible to the masses. They were given everything they needed to make their full-time job. They got equipment, a place to stay, food, drink, drugs, and access to gigs. For a group of young and fairly inexperienced artists, this was a great deal, so they conceded and allowed the arrangement with Nico to happen, and Reed would write a few songs for Nico to sing lead on the album. Sterling Morrison's views on Nico's influence on the band. There were problems from the very beginning because there were so many songs that were appropriate for Nico and she wanted to sing them all. And she would try to do little sexual politics things in the band. Whoever seemed to be having undue influence on the course of events, you'd find Nico close by. She went from Lou to Cale, but neither of those affairs lasted long. The story of the album, The Velvet Underground Nico, follows a path less traveled, which is perfect for all these players involved. The album can be found at the top of the pyramid as an origin of influence on countless artists and musical genres. The recording and distribution of this album is very DIY, punk rock, outside the norm, especially when you're going back to 1965 and 1966. Andy Warhol had the idea that the Velvet should first record the album, and his people go and hit the streets to find the taker to formally sign the band to a major record label and distribute the work. The bulk of the album was recorded at Skeptor, and there's a famous acetate of these sessions that materialized in the most random and one-in-a-million type of way. The origins of the acetate has a cool story behind it. Here's an excerpt from the story from Rolling Stone. In April 1966, Norman Dolph recorded the first test pressing in secret after hours in exchange for a painting by the group's then manager Andy Warhol. Warhol wanted to record and cut the acetate before the band signed the record label to minimize the label intrusion. Dolph sent the acetate to Columbia Records, who rejected it alongside Atlantic and Elektra. Verve Records would eventually agree to distribute the band's debut album. Now fast forward to 2002, when record collector Warren Hill saw the acetate at a street sale in New York City and bought it for 75 cents. That's absolutely just mind-boggling to me to think that something like this would end up at a street sale in New York City. In New York, in 2006, Hill put the record up for auction on eBay and thought the record initially sold for $155,401. It was determined that the winning bidder was fraudulent. Hill re-auctioned the vinyl record with more stringent buying requirements in place, selling the acetate to its current owner. The seller says once he bought the record, he immediately placed it in a safe and chose not to listen to it. It wasn't worth it to me to even handle the record, let alone drag a needle across it, he tells us. This is not a conventional record that can be played thousands and thousands of times. It's an acetate. It's equivalent of a CD you'd burned 10 years ago. The original acetate is cool to listen to, and the tracks have been released on deluxe editions of the album. It can be found on streaming services. I know it's on Spotify. Many of the tracks on the acetate are what you hear on the album, with some tweaking here and there. As mentioned in the Rolling Stone article, The album was turned down by Columbia, Atlantic, and Elektra, among others. The content of the lyrics was something these companies did not want to be a part of or associated with, and Atlantic didn't like the overall sound of the album, especially that of John Cale's viola. The Atlantic part I find interesting. On the jazz side, I find Atlantic to be a progressive label in nature. Go listen to some of Ornette Coleman's albums on Atlantic. Those records pushed the boundaries of the genre, but the rock side of the shop was a bit more conservative, as I understood they were looking for hits and airplay. The Velvet Underground Nico does not fit the bill for them, or anybody else for that matter. The album was eventually picked up by MGM for release on their Verve label, which was the home of another avant-garde rock act, the Mothers of Invention, led by iconic Frank Zappa. The album credits Andy Warhol as a producer, but all involved with the album will state that he had nothing to do with the recording process of the album. The arrangements were mostly done by John Cale. The production on the original recordings were done by Norman Dolph at Skepter Studios, and Tom Wilson of MGM was the guy on the post-production work with the re-recording of the final versions of Heroin, Venus and Furs, and I'm Waiting for the Man, as well as the production of Sunday Morning, which was a late add to the album for commercial appeal. Wilson was most noted up to this point as a producer for many of Bob Dylan's albums, including his introduction of electronic instruments to his albums. Warhol's most noted contribution to the album is the cover art, the banana, which can be peeled off to reveal the edible part of the fruit, which makes it one of the coolest and most innovative album covers to this era and of all time. The sleeve was not without controversy. The back of the cover shows a visual of actor Eric Emerson. Emerson sued for unauthorized use of his likeness on the album, which could be seen as an act of desperation on Emerson's part, as he was in the midst of legal troubles on drug possession charges and was in financial peril. The lawsuit caused a disruption of the album's release, where all the copies that were in stores had to be recalled and a black sticker was placed over the image in question, so that any momentum that the album had was to have upon initial release was thwarted by this. The album had an uphill climb for mainstream popularity, and the combination of the record-buying public unable to have access to the album and radio stations not having the album to play due to its risque content, the album was considered a commercial and financial failure, and the album peaked at the 171 position on the Billboard charts. That's a brief history of the album. Now let's go jump into the tracks. Sunday Morning, the opening track of the album. This, in my opinion, is one of the safest, most pop-driven tracks ever recorded by the Velvet Underground. Sunday Morning was the final track recorded for the album, as producer Tom Wilson felt the album needed a single to drive the album, and he also felt the album needed another track with Nico on the lead vocals to round out the album. Ultimately, Lou Reed handed the lead vocals on this track, with Nico providing some of the backing vocals. I feel this track was the correct choice because the musical mood and the playing have a bit of a sweetness to them, in which Lou Reed's voice would carry the mood a bit better than the darker vocal style of Nico. Lyrically, I can see where this can be a candidate for Nico's track, because in a way the song is kind of depressing, but the musical mood brings an uplifting nature, at least to me. Let's take a moment to do a lyric read. Sunday morning, bring the dawn in. It's just a restless feeling by my side. Early dawning, Sunday morning. It's just a wasted year so close behind. Watch out, the world's behind you. There's always someone around you who will call. It's nothing at all. Sunday morning, and I'm falling. I've got a feeling. I don't want to know. Early dawning, Sunday morning. It's all the streets you've crossed, not so long ago. Watch out, the world's behind you. There's always someone around you who will call. It's nothing at all. See, there's definitely an atmosphere to that particular track there. It's very nice. It's beautiful. It's calming. Lou Reed does a fantastic job with it. It's a great opening track for the album, but I mean, I can just imagine that somebody who's not familiar with the album and just played this one track and be like, oh, this is going to be a great pop album, but they're definitely going to be in for a shock as they go along with the album. And as we go on to the second track, I'm Waiting for the Man. This track is straightforward with its theme, and it's about a guy looking to score some heroin from the man. The directness of the title is decisive, as Lou Reed can have taken a coy approach by naming the track I'm Waiting For a Man, because I'm sure we would have seen some people trying to score, and so many times they and the dealer that they have really try to keep things on the down low. But this track paints them as everything being out in the open. The characters, the plot, the theme, it's great. It works well. The specifics on the location in New York City are right here. I'm waiting for the man. $26 in my hand. Up to Lexington, 125. Feel sick and dirty, more dead than alive. I'm waiting for my man. Then there's the interaction the guy who is waiting for the man has with a passerby on the street. Hey, white boy, what are you doing uptown? Hey, white boy, you chasing our women around? Oh, pardon me, sir. It's the furthest from my mind. I'm just looking for a dear, dear friend of mine. I'm waiting for my man. You have to love Lou Reed's lyrics here. As a scorer, it's still being kind of truthful in his interaction with the stranger, as his intentions are specific. He's not there for people watch or get laid. He just needs to meet this man who calls dear, dear friend, probably to get the stranger moving along so he can just make a score. Finally, we meet the man and all that he brings with him. As for somebody who's far from the heroin culture, it paints a picture to me that I never want to encounter in my life, but there's so much color brought to the music amidst the darkness of the physical and mental place the scorer is in. Here he comes. He's all dressed in black. Beat up shoes and a big straw hat. He's never early. He's always late. First thing you'll learn, he's always got to wait. I'm waiting for my man. Work it now. Up to a brownstone. Up 3 flights of stairs. Everybody's pinned you. No one cares. He's got the works. He gives you sweet taste. Then you gotta split because you got no time to waste. I'm waiting for my man. Baby, don't you holler. Darling, don't you bawl or shout. I'm feeling good. You never know I'm gonna work it on out. I'm feeling good. I feel oh so fine. Until tomorrow. But just some other time. I'm waiting for my man. Walk it home. Fantastic stuff. Now, on to the next track, Femme Fatale. Femme Fatale is a song that Andy Warhol requested Lou Reed to write about actress Edie Sedgwick. Sedgwick was in some of Andy Warhol's films, and in many articles it stated that Sedgwick was Warhol's muse for a brief period, and they were also involved romantically for a period. But around the time of the recording of the Velvet Underground Nico, the relationship between Warhol and Sedgwick deteriorated professionally and personally. And here we have the track Femme Fatale, which is the first track on the album where we hear Nico on lead vocals. Let's jump into these lyrics. Here she comes, you better watch your step. She's gonna break your heart in two, it's true. It's not hard to realize. Just look into her false-colored eyes. She builds you up just to build you down. What a clown. Because everybody knows she's a femme fatale. The things she does to please, she's a femme fatale. She's just a little tease. She's a femme fatale. See the way she walks. Hear the way she talks. You're put down in her book. You're number 37, have a look. She's going to smile to make you frown. What a clown. Little boy. She's from the street. Before you start, you're already beat. She's going to play you for a fool. Yes, it's true. And then it goes into the chorus again about femme fatale. I don't know what more I can say about the lyrics, what they hardly portray. Having a female sing the song is brilliant, and Nico's voice is so damn matter of fact and so downright bitchy in a way. In my opinion, it's like Nico is talking to her girlfriends about some girl that's in the room with them, and she's pulling no punches, and she's keeping the conversation to a whisper so the girl who is the subject of this verbal undressing can't hear it. Also, the backing vocals by Lou Reed and Sterling Morrison give that male seal of approval, like they've been burned by this girl, who's the femme fatale. This is one of my favorites of the album. Now, on to my absolute favorite track on the album, Venus in Furs. Let's put this to bed right now. Not into bondage, S&M, or submissive sexual craziness, but of course this stuff is so intriguing to somebody who is from the outside. And my thought is, if this works for you and nobody gets hurt, go for it. I'm not stopping you. The lyrics are based on a novella by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. I hope I probably brutalized that, as not very good with that name. His name is used as the basis for the term masochism. What I do love about this album is the droning nature musically from this track, which fits perfectly with the scene I just spoke of. I'm no expert when it comes to instrumentation because, heck, I'm just a fan. But we have the primary instruments being an electric viola and Lou Reed playing an ostrich-tuned guitar. The sound is so fresh for 1967, and it still sounds fresh today in a primal sort of way. And Lou Reed's vocals are aggressive in tone, where there's a sound of joyous pain, desperation, and satisfaction in his voice. And why wouldn't they be? The picture being painted here lyrically is just so lush and clear. No color being used, just black and grays. Some white as a contrast, with the exception of the tears of joy the receiver, the punishment showing. Let's read these lyrics. Shiny, shiny boots of leather, whiplash girl child in the dark. Comes in bells, your servant, don't forsake him. Strike dear mistress and cure his heart. Downy sins of streetlight fancies, chase the costume she shall wear. Ermine furs adorned an imperious Severin awaits you there. I am tired, I'm weary, I could sleep for 1,000 years, 1,000 dreams that would wake me. Different colors made of tears. Kiss the boot, shiny, shiny leather in the dark. Tongue of thongs, the belt that does await you. Strike dear mistress and cure his heart. Severin, speak so slightly. Severin, down on your bended knee. Taste the whip, and love not given lightly. Taste the whip, now plead for me. I am tired, I'm weary. I can sleep for 1,000 years. 1,000 dreams that would awake me. Different colors made of tears. Shiny, shiny, shiny boots of leather. Whiplash girl child in the dark. Severin, your servant comes in bells. Please don't forsake him. Strike dear mistress and cure his heart. That is just amazing, amazing stuff. Takes a lot of guts to write something like that. And, it just kind of makes you wonder. It's like, man, does somebody have a firsthand account of this stuff to be able to write something like that? Or just at least have the most vivid imagination you can possibly think of, and trying to put yourself in that position of just vulnerability and pain and just joy that they want. Just absolutely amazing. It's for sure my favorite track on the album. Now as we move on to Run, Run, Run. This is another track about hard drugs, which Lou Reed wrote quickly on the back of an envelope on his way to a show. Again, New York City appears to be the setting of the song. The bleak nature lyrically is the song appears to be about various characters who are all young in age, and they are so deep in their passion for the drugs. How they make them feel the darkness involved in the potential endgame of death. Let's read these lyrics. Teenage Mary said to Uncle Dave, I sold my soul, must be saved. Gonna take a walk down to Union Square. You never know what you're gonna find there. You gonna run, 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 take a drag or two. Run, 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 gypsy death and you. Tell you what you do. Margarita Passion had to get her fix. She wasn't well. She was getting sick. Went to her soul. She wasn't high. Didn't know. Think she could buy it. And she would run, run, run. Take a drag or two. Run, run, run. Gypsy death and you. Tell you what you do. Seasick Sarah had a golden nose. Hobnail boots wrapped around her toes. When she turned blue, all the angels screamed. They didn't know. They couldn't make the scene. And to me, I just want to just jump in on that. To me, that just sounds like someone just OD'd and they're dying, and the angels are there just to take her soul away, and they're screaming. It's almost like they're not ready to do it. And the scene that they've encountered is just something even beyond them. I mean, you're talking about death and just the absolute tragedy that goes along with seeing a young person like that just being in such peril and just helplessness and just gone. It's just really sad. And then we get into the last part here, the last character, Beardless Harry. What a waste. Couldn't even get a small town taste. Rode the trolleys down to 47. Figured he was good, gonna get himself to heaven. Because he had to run, 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 take a drag or two, run, 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 gypsy death and you, tell you what to do. Now, the rhythm of the song makes you want to dance. It's just crazy considering the theme. This is one of those songs for me that I gained a greater appreciation for over the years. When I dove deeper into the lyrics, and it was just so great personally, just doing this show and just taking a deep dive into this stuff. to me, it's almost like it's tragic, and you can just see the drug culture there. It's not who you think that it always is. And a lot of times, like I think now we're just seeing the drug culture getting tossed into the suburbs. But you got to think back into 1966, 1967. People in the suburbs were like, oh, this is a city thing. But man, there's people probably going from suburbs, going into the cities, looking to get themselves a score and get themselves a fix. Just crazy stuff. It's just being very true and just very honest in the lyrics. It's just fantastic. Okay, we're going to go on to All Tomorrow's Parties, which rounds out side one. I'm going to be lazy for a minute and read from the wiki regarding this track because what was there was just so good. Couldn't really add too much more to that. The inspiration for the song came from Reed's observation of the Warhol clique. According to Reed, the song is a very apt description of certain people at the factory at the time. I watched Andy watching everybody. I would hear people say the most astonishing things, the craziest things, the funniest things, the saddest things. In a 2006 interview, Reed's bandmate John Cale stated that the song was about a girl called Daryl, a beautiful petite blonde with 3 kids, 2 of whom were taken away from her. The song was Warhol's favorite by the Velvet Underground. Here we have Nico on lead vocals. I cannot say if her vocal style added anything to this track, but to imagine it with anybody else singing it wouldn't seem right to me. But I guess if there was any of the band members being prominent figure at a Warhol party, it would be Nico, as the people associated with Warhol were from diverse professions. I can picture Nico milling about a party with the rest of the Velvet Underground being the house band at the event and just being conscientious observers of the festivities and just taking this all in. Yeah, here are the lyrics. In what costume shall the poor girl wear to all tomorrow's parties? A hand-me-down dress from who knows where to all tomorrow's parties. And where will she go? What shall she do? When midnight comes around, she'll turn once more to Sunday's clown and cry behind a door. In what costume shall the poor girl wear to all tomorrow's parties? Why, silks and linens of yesterday's gowns to all tomorrow's parties. And what shall she do with Thursday's rags when Monday comes around? She'll turn once more to Sunday's clown and cry behind a door. In what costume shall the poor girl wear to all tomorrow's parties? For Thursday's child is Sunday's clown, for whom will go mourning. A blackened shroud, a hand-me-down gown of rags and silks, a costume fit for one who sits and cries for all tomorrow's parties. Almost sounds like a Cinderella story in a way. Having this character here, which Lou Reed spoke of here, this sounds like a single mom here, just trying to change her life and do something different. And as a parent, it's just, to me, it's just very mind-boggling. And just this woman just had no responsibilities, and she didn't care. She wanted to be a part of this group. She wanted to do something else. She had her kids taken away from her. She would have done anything to fit in, but from the sounds of the lyrics, it's almost kind of like she's being clowned in a way that, yeah, it's like, all right, we know where you come from, and you're trying to dress yourself up to make yourself something that you're not, and trying to fit in with this group. And to me, yeah, it's almost like a little bit of a ridicule going on there with the lyrics, and just Lou Reed just being that conscientious observer, and he just kind of can see through people, which is a pretty cool character to have. All right, now we're going to go on to side 2, and opening side 2 is the track Heroin. This is probably the most famous song off of this album, I would think. If anybody who's not familiar with the album would have heard something, it probably would have been Heroin. I mean, I do believe that this song was played a bit in my youth when classic rock was a more popular format, and the radio in general was more popular. But into heroin, the drugs, I mean, just such a polarizing topic, especially within the realm of rock music. Drugs became more mainstream in the 1960s. They were always there, but they're being brought out into the consciousness of the middle class America, and the government's weighing in, churches are weighing in, fear is the theme. Let's get real here for a minute. Heroin's a crazy and dangerous drug, and overdoing the drug can result in death. That's a part of the narrative. but the need, the use, the addiction, the feelings are all part of the narrative, which I feel like Lou Reed paints a great picture of with the lyrics, and the Velvet's playing on this track sets the mood. It starts out slow with the guitars and features the feature instrument, and then setting the mood being low and even depressed. And there's Maureen Tucker adding some subtle drum beats, and ever so softly, and John Cale comes in with the droning electric viola, which in my opinion fits so much better than the bass would on this song. The lyrics are they're so dark. Let's just jump right into these. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going to try the kingdom if I can. Because it makes me feel like I'm a man when I put the spike into my vein. And I tell you things are not quite the same when I'm rushing on my run and I feel just like Jesus' son. And I guess that I just don't know. I have made a big decision. I'm going to try to nullify my life. Because when the blood begins to flow, when it shoots up the dropper's neck, when I'm closing in on death, you can't help me now, you guys. And all you sweet girls with all your sweet talk, you can just take a walk. You can all just go take a walk. And I guess that I just don't know. I wish I was born 1,000 years ago. I wish I had sailed the darkest seas on the great big clipper ship, going from this land here to that, on the sailor suit and on the cap, away from the big city where a man cannot be free of all the evil of this town and of himself and those around. Oh, I guess that I just don't know. Heroin, be the death of me. Heroin, this is my life, and it's my life because a main line into my vein leads to a center in my head, and then I'm better off than dead because when the smack begins to flow, I really don't care anymore about all the gyms in this town, and all the politicians making crazy sounds, and everybody putting everybody else down, and all the dead bodies piled up in mounds. Because when the smack begins to flow, and I just don't care anymore. When the heroin is in my blood, and that blood is in my head, then thank God I'm as good as dead, and thank your God that I'm not aware, and thank God that I just don't care, and I guess that I just don't know. Oh, I guess I just don't know. Wow. That is just, for a chill song, is at the start in the major frenetic pace that the electric viola is so chaotic, and the song eventually ends similar to the way it all started, just slow and chill. This song is one of the 3 tracks that were re-recorded at TTG Studios in Hollywood. Check out the original acetate if you can. There's a different mood and some alternate lyrics. Another cool tidbit is that Lou Reed wrote Heroin back in 1964 while working as a house writer for a record company. In an interview with WLIR in 1972, Reed said he wrote the lyrics while working for the record company. I was working for a record company as a songwriter, and they locked me in a room and write 10 surf songs. I wrote Heroin. I said, hey, I got something for you. They said, never going to happen. Never going to happen. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. I just can't grasp that this thing was written back in 1964. It's absolutely just boggled my mind. And just picturing Lou Reed as a house writer, writing surf songs among everything. But that just shows you how diverse Lou Reed is and how versatile that he actually is. Like all right, I can crank out these pop hits like these surf songs, but then I can also write something like Heroin, which is just absolutely dark and just absolutely crazy. Now we go into There She Goes Again. The Velvets had such a pop sense. The sounds of the song is just so pleasing to the ear. I can't help but catch your attention in a far different way than Heroin does at the start of the side. Musically, we have pop with those jangly guitars like the Byrds and the Beatles, but then we jump into the lyrics and it gets very deep and maybe going to a place where we don't want to even speak about in many ways. I look at this song as a point of spousal abuse, whether it's true or up for debate. There she goes again. She's out on the streets again. She's down on her knees, my friend. But she'll never ask you please again. Here's the scene from my mind as a guy throwing a woman out of their home. This can go either way. Who is the one at fault for the argument? Now take a look. There's no tears in her eyes. She won't take it from just any guy. What can you do? You see her walking on down the street. Look at all your friends she's going to meet. You better hit her. The woman is ready to move on from here with these lyrics. And she's going to be more critical of who she enters into a relationship with in the future. And she just won't take it from any guy. She's gaining confidence. She's walking down the street, meeting new people. And then Lou Reed chimes in, you better hit her. This is the abuse part of the story, because what would an abusive, controlling person do in this situation when he sees the person he has powered with physical strength do? Bring them back with kindness. When the opportunity presents itself, go back to the physical abuse. Let's wrap up the lyrics on this track. There she goes again. She's knocked out on her feet again. She's down on her knees, my friend. But you know she'll never ask you please again. Now take a look. There's no tears in her eyes. Like a bird, you know she would fly. What can you do? You see her walking on down the street. Look at all the friends she's going to meet. You better hit her. Now take a look. There's no tears in her eyes. Like a bird, you know she will fly, fly, fly away. See her walking on down the street. Look at all the friends she's going to meet. She's going to bawl and shout. She's going to work it out. She's going to work it out. Bye, bye, bye. All she's all right. And I just love the way that wraps up that track, because I mean, it's just a relationship abuse is just such a nasty thing. And just to see kind of like the uplifting spirit at the end of that track, saying, you know what? She's a strong individual. She's gonna figure it out. She's gonna get away. She's gonna stand on her feet, and she's gonna build a new life for herself. And that paints a happy ending type of picture to that track. Now we're gonna move on to I'll Be Your Mirror. The story on this track was that the band wanted Nico to sing this song in a soft voice, but take after take, she was not getting it, and it brought Nico to tears because she just couldn't get it. Finally, she was given a last shot to get it, and the final product on the album is it. She got it. Look at these lyrics and absorb this. It's a beautiful song about a relationship where one person may not be in the best state or frame of mind, but having that significant person there to guide you along the way is a thing of beauty. I'll be your mirror. Reflect what you are. In case you don't know, I'll be the wind, the rain, and the sunset. The light on your door to show you that you're home. When you think the night has seen your mind, that inside you're twisted and unkind, let me stand to show you that you are blind. Please put down your hands, 'cause I see you. I find it hard to believe you don't know the beauty you are. But if you don't let me be your eyes, a hand to your darkness, so you won't be afraid. When you think the night has seen your mind, that inside you're twisted and unkind, let me stand to show you that you are blind. Please put down your hands, 'cause I see you. I'll be your mirror. Absolutely beautiful stuff right there. You're seeing that one person is in a very vulnerable state, and then the other person in that relationship is there to almost like not even to uplift them, to make them feel better, because sometimes that isn't what people need. They just need to be guided. Like who knows better than your significant other what you're capable of and what your potential is. And sometimes you just need to have a guiding light, and you just need someone to hold your hand just to kind of get you to where you need to go, because so many times you do know where you need to go, and they know where you need to go, and they can help you bring you there. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Black Angels' Death Song. John Cale's piercing viola on this track is the main sound, and it makes me wonder if this track was the kiss of death that Atlantic Records had to hear for them to reject this album, because the sounds from the viola are just not pleasant to the ears. This was the last track I tackled for my review because it's my least favorite on the album. The viola doesn't bother me. It's just the opinion that it's the weakest track in the album, which makes the whole a little more great, because whether it be people or nature, there are flaws in fits, because the album is just, the song is just so raw, and the album as a whole is raw, and the perfect lyrics and the perfect sound was just not the goal of the album. And And it just wasn't for this track either. The lyrics are about death, and the title explains, but the lyrics are long-winded, and the song clocks in under 4 minutes, and I just get fatigued listening to the thing. And sometimes I've even been known to skip the track on occasion. I know this is not something that the album listener wants to hear, but I kind of gotten past that at this point, so I take it in. It's not a problem. And just sometimes just not in the frame of mind to tackle the song at the moment, so I just leave it at that. And now we're just going to go on to the final track here, European Sun. The way I describe this track is that it's an explosive loud jam with lots of noise. I use the term heavy a lot when it comes to powerful music, but this in my mind does not fall into that category as heavy, though what is presented to the commercial masses would be something that would make their ears and brains bleed. But for this band and this album, this just works. Among the noise, there's a groove to be found underneath. What is on top, you have the peel away in some of that top and get to the heart of the groove. And the coolest sounds that I hear on this track is when John Cale is hitting a stack of plates with a metal chair, which is just really just a cool tidbit that I was able to find when I was doing the research on this album. The lyrics are simple and read as a poem. The song is dedicated to a professor Lou Reed had at Syracuse University by the name of Delmore Schwartz. Schwartz was not a fan of rock music lyrics, so this song is a perfect tribute to one of Reed's literary mentors who passed away during the recording of the song. The first pressings of the album included a dedication to Delmore Schwartz. The lyrics read as follows: "You killed your European son. You spit on those under 21. But now your blue car's gone. You better say so long. Hey, bye, bye, bye. You made your wallpapers green. You want to make love to the scene. Your European son is gone. You'd better say so long. Your clowns bid you goodbye. European Sun" is the longest track on the album, clocking in at just under 8 minutes. The perfect ending to the album that takes you to this visual ride of darkness. And why not make that mind tired with over 6 minutes of what can best be described as art rock madness. This is just a tremendous album. Now we're going to get into my story with the album. My relationship with this album goes back to just seeing the album on display at record shows, and that I would go to when I was in high school. And now knowing more about why this thing was on display at these record shows is that this album, for its original copies, is pretty much a rarity, and these dealers wanted to show off and say, hey, look, we got an original copy here of the Velvet Underground Nico. And the thing was always, even back then, we're talking in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the thing was pretty pricey, especially for a high school kid who didn't have much money in his pocket at that point. So I wouldn't have been able to throw down $50 or $60 that people were asking for a beat up copy of the Velvet Underground Nico. But if I can go back into a time machine at this point and just know the collectability of this album and just how much this album has become for me, I would have easily dropped 50 or 60 back at that time, especially since I didn't have any responsibilities. But we can't do that, and unfortunately, I don't have an original copy of the album. The album was a curiosity I had just by the cover, and the work that was created by Andy Warhol, who I was familiar with, just from the fact that I'm just really interested into 60s counterculture, and even as a young kid, I would even see this album even prominently at some of the record stores that I would go to, doing CD shopping, and seeing that there. And again, it was just one of those kind of unknown curiosities. There was really nothing for me to kind of fall back on, because the album just wasn't played on the radio, and I knew nothing about it. I really didn't know anything about the Velvet Underground at all. But I did finally buy the album on CD. I had to have been probably about 18 or 19 years old. I can't even really say why I bought it, but I'm sure it had something to do with me going down the rabbit hole of just discovering more of the music of that era, and it being that album just being held in such great regard by the people who lived in that era, and it was a prominent part of their life and a prominent part of their collections. So, I mean, I was discovering more diverse music at that time, and mostly from the 1960s. So, having the Velvet Underground and Nico as it was a blind buy for me, and it was the first Velvet Underground album that I did buy. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend that being this particular album being the first Velvet Underground album that someone would buy if you're interested in the band, just because it does sound so raw, and it's just very DIY, just garage-like sounding. I probably would steer them more toward something like Loaded as a first album, but for me, whenever I'm discovering new music, even to this day, I always like to start out with the band's or the artist's debut album and kind of work my way down from there. So to me, it's not surprising that I did start out with this album, but when it comes to the album, and I mean, I just love the DIY nature of the album, and it could be an inspiration to anybody today, as they don't need to be an Andy Warhol type of character in order to be creative. Even when it comes to, I mean, especially now when it comes to music, I mean, I'm sitting here recording this podcast on a MacBook Pro, and man, so many people are just recording great music on their MacBooks and their other Windows computers and everything too. So there really isn't a barrier of entry when it comes to creating art. And heck, I even consider this podcast on many levels a piece of art as well. This is my art. I'm not a musician. I'm a fan, and I want to be able to share some of these stories here. And this is kind of the part of the show that I really like the most. The album was a failure on many levels, but it's one of those works where it receives its love and just due after the fact. You can find many reflected reviews online today. But back in 1967, this album was just a blip on the musical landscape, and it just really wasn't worth the time for the critics to write about. And one of the things that I really want to use as part of this podcast is trying to find some reviews of these works from back when they were recorded, and I couldn't find anything on this album. I mean, everything is just a retrospective review, and everybody's waxing poetic about the album and saying how great it is, and probably this album, and this isn't the only album that's going to fall into this criteria. There's just so many pieces of work, whether it be music or film or art, that in the moment the public just doesn't get it. But when we look at revisionist history, like, wow, this thing was a great piece of work in the moment of time, and you can definitely appreciate that for what it was. But at the end here, we do have something here that's lasting and special. And I hope that I did this album justice with this episode. And I really hope something new was learned, because I learned a lot about doing the research on this album. And I had a blast doing it and recording this first episode of the Church of Rock podcast. And I just want to thank everybody who took a listen to this here today. And as I said, this is all brand new to me. I've never done anything like this before. So my hope is that this will be the worst podcast that I produce, but we're going to get there. And I'm having a lot of fun researching and reviewing these albums. And I really want you all to come back here. So wherever you get your podcast from, just hit that subscribe button, just so this podcast comes to you, just drops you when it's released. And I just want to, again, much gratitude to everybody here, and I will see you next time.